Thanksgiving dinner. The house is full of laughter and the smell of turkey. I'm sitting at the long wooden table, fork in hand, when I decide to share my news. So, I got invited to speak at the university's awards ceremony next month, I say, trying to keep my voice steady. It's actually a pretty big honor, Mom cuts me off mid-sentence. Let's be honest here, she says loudly, her voice carrying across the room. She's not the smart one. The words hit me like a slap. My cousins giggle. My siblings smirk. Uncle Dave clears his throat awkwardly. The room goes silent except for the sound of someone's fork clinking against their plate. I feel my cheeks burn, but I force myself to swallow the tears. I won't cry. Not here. Not in front of them. Because what they don't know is that I have a plan. A plan that's been months in the making. And soon, very soon, they'll all understand exactly how wrong they've been about me. I think back to childhood, to all those report cards I hid in my backpack. Every single A that went unnoticed. Every honor roll certificate that gathered dust in my room. Mom would fawn over Amanda's C+ in English, throwing parties for her improvement. But my straight A's? Those were just expected. Or ignored completely. I remember the first time she called me just average. I was 12, showing her my science fair trophy. She barely looked up from Amanda's math homework. That's nice, honey, she said flatly. But Amanda really needs help with fractions. That night, I cried myself to sleep, wondering why my achievements felt invisible. The pattern continued through high school. Amanda got praise for making the volleyball team. I got silence for being valedictorian. Amanda got a car for graduation. I got told to find a real job. The resentment began then, growing like a seed in my chest. I learned to expect nothing and give everything. Last year, I applied for the most prestigious academic program at my university. Full scholarship, research position, leadership honors. The works. I didn't tell anyone in my family. I couldn't bear the thought of Mom rolling her eyes or telling me I was reaching too high again. When the acceptance letter came, I stared at it for 10 minutes straight. Full ride. Not just tuition, but living expenses, books, everything. I was one of only 5 students selected nationwide. My hands shook as I read the letter over and over. I tried to share the news at dinner that night. I got into this program, I started, pulling out the official letter. Mom glanced at it for 2 seconds. Stop making things up, she said, turning back to her food. You need to focus on finding a real job. She actually accused me of lying about my own acceptance letter. That's when I knew I had to prove myself in a way she couldn't ignore. Amanda had been unemployed for 2 years after college. 2 years of living at home, of Mom making excuses for her. She's just finding herself, Mom would say. She's being selective. Then last month, Amanda finally got hired at a small tech company. Nothing fancy, just an entry-level position. Mom threw a party. An actual party. She invited the whole family, bought balloons, and made a cake. The dining room was decorated like Amanda had won the Nobel Prize. I wasn't even invited. I found out about it from my cousin's Instagram story. When I asked Mom why I wasn't included, she snapped at me. Because Amanda actually made it, she said, her voice sharp with irritation. She has a real job now. She's successful. I stood there, thinking about my 3.9 GPA, my research publications, my leadership roles. But apparently, none of that was real enough for her. That's when I met Dean Harris. Dr. Sarah Harris, the most respected woman in our academic department. She was known for being tough but fair, for seeing potential where others saw nothing. When she asked me to her office after class, I was nervous. I thought I was in trouble. I've been watching your work, she said, leaning back in her leather chair. Your research on social psychology is exceptional. Have you considered academia as a career path? I nearly laughed. Me? In academia? But her eyes were serious, kind. She became my mentor over the next few months. She praised my intelligence, pushed me to think bigger, to dream beyond what I thought possible. And then she told me about the upcoming awards ceremony. "I want you to give the keynote speech," she said. "On underrepresented voices in academia. You'd be speaking to students, faculty, and their families." My heart stopped. Their families. Including mine. Preparing that speech was the hardest thing I'd ever done. I wrote draft after draft, staying up until 3 in the morning, crafting every word. It was about being underestimated, about proving yourself when nobody believes in you. About finding your voice in a world that tries to silence you. I added one line that made my hands shake as I typed it. "To the people who said I wasn't the smart one. I'm glad you were wrong." It felt dangerous, powerful, like I was finally fighting back after years of staying quiet. Dean Harris reviewed my speech and smiled. "This is going to change lives," she said. "Including your own." I printed it out and practiced in front of my mirror, imagining the moment when Mom would finally understand. When she would finally see me for who I really was. I couldn't send the invitation directly to Mom. She would have thrown it away without reading it. So I gave it to Dad, knowing he'd make sure she got it. For weeks, I heard nothing. Complete silence. I started to think they wouldn't come. Then Dad called. "We got your invitation," he said quietly. "Mom wants to know if this is legitimate." Legitimate. As if I would lie about something this important. As if I would make up an entire award ceremony just to fool them. But I swallowed my anger and said yes, it was real. 3 days later, Dad called again. "We'll be there," he said. "All of us." My heart pounded. Amanda too. My whole family would be there to witness my moment. To finally see what I'd been working toward all these years. The night before the ceremony, Mom called me. Her voice was flat, emotionless. "We'll come to your little event," she said. "But don't expect us to clap just because you know how to talk." Her words were like ice water in my veins. Even now, even faced with proof of my success, she couldn't bring herself to be proud. "I don't need you to clap," I said quietly. "I just need you to listen." But she had already hung up. I sat in my apartment, staring at my phone, feeling that familiar ache in my chest. The same ache I'd felt for years whenever she dismissed me. But this time, it felt different. This time, I wasn't going to let it break me. I looked at my speech, printed and ready. Tomorrow, she would have to listen. Tomorrow, she would have to face the truth about who I really was. And nothing she said could take that away from me. I bought a new dress for the ceremony. Something sharp and classy, navy blue with clean lines. My first real splurge in years. I stood in the dressing room, looking at myself in the mirror, and something clicked. I didn't need their validation anymore. I didn't need Mom's approval or Amanda's acceptance. This wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about proving them wrong. It was about proving to myself that I was worth something. That my voice mattered. That my achievements were real, whether they acknowledged them or not. I bought the dress and walked out of the store with my head held high. For the first time in years, I felt proud of myself. Not because of what others might think, but because I finally saw what Dean Harris had seen all along. I was smart. I was capable. I was enough. The day of the ceremony arrived bright and clear. I walked into the university auditorium and felt my breath catch. My name was everywhere. On banners, on programs, on the screen behind the podium. Students I'd mentored over the years smiled and waved. Faculty members stopped to shake my hand. "There's our star," Professor Williams said, beaming. "Ready to make history?" I nodded, though my heart was pounding. I kept checking my watch, looking toward the entrance. Where was my family? The ceremony was starting in 20 minutes. Then I saw Dean Harris approaching, elegant in her black suit. "You look perfect," she said, squeezing my hand. "Remember, you belong here. You've earned this." I nodded, trying to calm my nerves. Ready or not, it was time. Just as I was about to walk backstage, I saw them. Mom, Dad, and Amanda, slipping into seats near the back. Mom looked around with barely concealed disdain, as if she couldn't believe she was there. Amanda rolled her eyes at something on her phone. Only Dad gave me a small thumbs up. I took a deep breath. This was it. This was my moment. I straightened my shoulders and walked toward the stage, my heels clicking against the polished floor. The audience was buzzing with anticipation. Hundreds of people, all here to listen to what I had to say. The lights dimmed. The microphone was waiting. I thought of every time Mom had called me average, every time she'd dismissed my dreams. Now it was time to show her exactly what average looked like. I delivered my speech with everything I had. Every word was deliberate, every pause calculated. I talked about being underestimated, about finding strength in silence, about proving yourself when the world tells you that you're not enough. My voice grew stronger with each sentence. The audience was captivated. I could feel their energy, their connection to my words. When I reached the part about believing in yourself despite others' doubts, I looked directly at Mom. She was staring at me, her face unreadable. But she wasn't looking away. When I finished, the auditorium erupted. People leaped to their feet. The applause was thunderous, rolling over me like a wave. I saw professors wiping their eyes. Students cheering. But Mom sat perfectly still, her hands folded in her lap. She was the only person in the room who wasn't clapping. After the ceremony, Dean Harris pulled me aside. Her eyes were bright with pride. That speech, that was more than smart, she said, her voice filled with emotion. That was legendary. You didn't just speak to them. You transformed them. I felt tears in my eyes. For the first time in my life, someone understood what I was capable of. Someone saw my potential and wasn't afraid to name it. Dean Harris continued, "You're the youngest person to ever receive this honor. And after tonight, I doubt anyone will question why." Mom was standing close enough to hear every word. I watched her face change, watched something shift in her expression. Was it a surprise? Shame? I couldn't tell. But for the first time in my life, my mother was hearing someone else validate what I'd been trying to tell her for years. Back at home, the silence was deafening. Mom sat in her chair, arms crossed, staring at the wall. Finally, she spoke. "You embarrassed me tonight," she said, her voice cold. "Standing up there, implying that your own family doesn't support you. Making us look like terrible parents." "I never mentioned you," I said quietly. I talked about being underestimated in general. But she wasn't listening. She never was. "You just love playing the victim, don't you?" she continued. "Making everyone feel sorry for you. It's pathetic." That's when something inside me snapped. After years of staying quiet, of swallowing my hurt, I finally found my voice. "You want to know what's pathetic?" I said, standing up. "What's pathetic is watching your mother tear you down for 22 years just because you're afraid of being shown up." The words poured out of me like a broken dam. I told her everything. Every time I cried alone after she dismissed my achievements. Every night I wondered why I wasn't good enough. Every moment I'd spent trying to earn love that seemed impossible to win. "You were the one who needed me to be dumb," I said, my voice shaking with emotion. "You were the one who couldn't handle having a daughter who might actually succeed. Because if I was smart, what did that make Amanda? What did that make you?" The room went completely silent. Dad stared at his hands. Amanda's mouth hung open. Mom's face was white with shock. For the first time in my life, I had spoken my truth. And it felt terrifying and liberating all at once. I walked to my room and came back with a folder I'd been hiding for months. Inside was my scholarship letter, official and stamped. I handed it to Dad. "You want to know something?" I said. "You never paid a dime for my education. Not one dime. full scholarship, all 4 years. And yet you act like I'm the burden. Dad read the letter, his eyes widening. Full ride, he whispered. This is incredible. He looked up at me with something I'd never seen before. Pride. Real, genuine pride. Why didn't you tell us? Because every time I tried to share good news, it got dismissed or ignored, I said. So I stopped trying. I looked at Mom, who was still staring at the letter in shock. I've been succeeding without you for years. Tonight just made it official. That's when Amanda exploded. This is just like you, she screamed, jumping up from the couch. Always trying to steal the spotlight. Always trying to make me look bad. I finally got a good job and you have to one-up me with your stupid ceremony. But I wasn't done yet. Speaking of your job, I said calmly, how's it going? Still enjoying it? Amanda's face went pale. She looked at Mom, then back at me. What's that supposed to mean? It means I know you were fired 3 weeks ago, I said. My friend works in HR there. She told me. The silence was deafening. Amanda's hands were shaking. Mom's face crumpled. They'd been lying to everyone, pretending Amanda was still employed just to save face. Suddenly, everything made sense. Mom's favoritism wasn't about love. It was about control. Amanda had always been the project, the one who needed constant support and validation. I was the threat, the one who might succeed without their help. That's why I had to be kept small, kept average. You were never proud of me, I said, looking directly at Mom. You were scared of me. Because deep down, you knew I was capable of things Amanda never could be. And if I succeeded, it would prove that your precious system was wrong. Mom's face crumpled. For the first time in my life, I saw her as she really was. Not the strong, confident woman I'd always tried to please. But a scared, insecure person who needed to keep others down to feel good about herself. A week later, I got a call that changed everything. A top academic journal wanted to publish my speech. A popular podcast about women in academia wanted me as a guest. I was becoming a voice for underrepresented students everywhere. I agreed to both, but only under one condition. The topic had to be about family invalidation and how to rise beyond it. I wanted to help other people who were going through what I'd experienced. People who were told they weren't smart enough, good enough, worthy enough. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Messages poured in from strangers saying my story resonated with them. From students who'd been dismissed by their families. From adults who'd spent years trying to prove themselves to people who would never listen. The podcast episode went viral within hours. Hundreds of thousands of downloads. Comments flooding in from people sharing their own stories. Your story is mine too, one person wrote. Thank you for giving me permission to be proud of myself. But one message stood out above all the others. It was from Mrs. Rodriguez, my high school English teacher. I always knew you had it in you, she wrote. I remember that essay you wrote about feeling invisible. Look at you now. You're anything but invisible. I'm so proud of you. I cried when I read it. Not tears of sadness, but tears of gratitude. Someone had seen me all along. Someone had believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself. And now I was using that belief to help others find their own voices. Of course, Mom tried to apologize. But it wasn't really an apology. You should have told me you were serious about this academic stuff, she said when she called. I would have been more supportive if I'd known it was real. Real. As if my dreams had been fake until someone else validated them. You were never listening, I replied calmly. Every time I tried to tell you about my achievements, you changed the subject or made it about Amanda. You didn't want to hear about my success. You wanted me to fail. She tried to argue, but I was done arguing. I'm not angry anymore, I said. I'm just finished. Finished trying to earn something that was never going to be given freely. And I meant it. The anger was gone, replaced by something more powerful. Peace. I moved out that month. Found a small apartment near campus, quiet and bright. I stopped attending family gatherings. Stopped calling for holidays. Blocked Amanda on all social media. No drama, no big confrontations. Just silence. Some people said I was being too harsh. But I'd learned that peace was more valuable than keeping up appearances. I'd spent too many years shrinking myself to fit into spaces that were never meant for me. It was time to build my own space. The quiet felt strange at first. But then it felt liberating. No more walking on eggshells. No more bracing myself for criticism. No more wondering if today would be the day someone finally saw my worth. I already knew my worth. That was enough. 3 months later, an envelope arrived in my mailbox. Thick, official-looking paper. I opened it with trembling hands. It was from Dean Harris. She was nominating me for a National Academic Fellowship. Full funding for graduate school, plus a research stipend. The letter was beautiful. "You were born for this," she wrote. "Your voice, your perspective, your brilliance, the world needs what you have to offer. It would be my honor to help you share it on a larger stage." I cried for the first time in months. But these weren't tears of pain. They were tears of pure, overwhelming pride. Someone believed in me. Someone saw my potential and was willing to fight for it. And most importantly, I believed in myself. I was invited back to my high school to give a talk to current students. As I stood at the podium where I'd once felt so small, I felt the weight of how far I'd come. A shy girl in the front row raised her hand. "What if your mom doesn't believe in you?" she asked, her voice barely audible. I looked at her, seeing myself at that age. "Then you believe in yourself twice as hard," I said, my voice steady and strong. "You find the people who do see your worth. And you hold on to them tight. Because your family's inability to recognize your value doesn't make you less valuable." The girl smiled, and I saw something spark in her eyes. Hope. The same hope Dean Harris had given me. I was passing it forward, one student at a time. 6 months later, I was standing on another stage. This time, it was the National Awards ceremony. The fellowship had been mine. I was the youngest recipient in the program's history. As I looked out at the audience, I thought about sending Mom a recording of this speech. To the woman who once told me I wasn't the smart one, I said into the microphone, I let her hear what the dean had to say. The audience laughed, but I wasn't laughing. I was free. Free from the need for her approval. Free from the pain of her rejection. Free to be exactly who I was meant to be. I walked off that stage and turned off my phone. I didn't need to hear her response. I didn't need her acknowledgement. I had something more valuable than her approval. I had my own voice. And I was never going to let anyone silence it.